So I'm about to go to Europe to do this talk, this opening keynote for NDC, which is a really big event. And I thought what I'd do, this is like my final prep before I go. I thought I'd record what I normally do in my preparation, and some people might find this interesting. I might try and publish this after NDC publishes the talk, and then you can sort of, back to back them and go, well, how good is the prep compared to what actually turns out at the end? If you're interested in this sort of thing, that is. So this is sort of the kind of one where I want to get everything precisely as I will do it when I'm actually there on the day. So I'm still at home here, but everything here is pretty much as I would want to have it in that environment. So everything from, I use a big timer like this, which so I can see where I'm at, and I have a little run sheet, which looks like this guy just here, which says, these are the things that I must be doing at certain points. So at 3 minutes, 8 minutes, 18 minutes, so on and so forth. And I'll link through to another blog post I've done on how I use that. I'm wearing what I'll probably wear. I have things that I would normally have. And it might sound a little bit pedantic, but I just kind of want all of this to be almost sort of rote learned, so that when I actually do it, it's the way that I've practiced. And this is what I do with all my talks. I always go through this same sort of process over and over and over again. And this one will be probably about the 6th time that I've practiced this talk. Brand new talk. I've never done this anywhere before. So that's always interesting. Now, one of the things I do is I make sure that I have everything set up on the machine that I need, and that includes doing things like making sure that I don't have Skype open anywhere, because that pops up annoying warnings. Even getting out of stuff like Dropbox, I really don't need that in the way just there. We can get that guy out. Anything that would possibly beep or make noises goes. So that's off. That should be all good. I then grab my deck, and what I'm going to do in this deck, I always make this decision. Am I going to extend or mirror? So am I going to have the same screen on the other end where the audience sees it as I have on my screen just here? Or am I going to have my presenter notes here and then the big screen there? I've decided that for this one, what I want to do is I want to have all my presenter notes on this screen, on the PC screen. And it's not that I read notes when I'm doing the talk, because you just can't, you can't mentally process bullet points. But I like to see what's coming next so I can kind of smoothly transition into it. So what I'm going to do as I'm practicing this one, and I just realized one thing I'm going to do here is not start our mate with the funky glasses playing automatically. So let's just jump into the animation pane, and we'll make sure that all of this will actually happen. Timing, on click, okay, like that, which is much better. Beautiful, so now all that should happen together, which is good. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this screen in presenter mode, but of course once I'm actually there on the stage, what will happen is this one will be in presenter mode, and then the big screen will just be, the entire presentation. Now, I like to have a lot of room so I can see what's coming up next. I have my clicker. I always have a mouse if I'm going to do any sort of demo. Trying to manage the pointer and the touchpad while you're on a stage is just, it's crap at the best of times. It's not good. Now what I'm going to do, and I do this in a lot of my talks, is the talk is going to start sort of 4 minutes before the talk starts, for want of a better term. So I'm actually going to start this, and then I'm going to explain why. So we do need to make sure this guy's turned on, and then we start this like that. Now, what I actually do is I normally have something that plays as people come into the room, because one of the things you find with an audience is everyone comes down and they're all sort of sitting rather formally in an environment, and then a hush falls over the room, and everyone, it's almost like the engine starts cold. You know what I mean? It's like just a bit rough. It takes a while to get warmed up. I find that by playing stuff like this, which I think is hilarious, hopefully other people will, everyone comes in, and first of all, they start sitting down and paying attention much earlier. And second of all, the other thing they do is they get warmed up. They get excited. They start laughing. And by the time you come on, then you're laughing as well, and everybody's just happy, and the whole thing starts off very nicely. In this case, I'm still looking for one more video here. I've got a couple of days before I need to actually find one. It will be something about how something has failed catastrophically with the likes of Google Glass. And this whole talk is sort of about how technology has changed over time. It's a much more sort of broader, theoretically insightful talk than a lot of my sort of dedicated security ones. I am personally a big fan of this next video because I just think it's hilarious, and I'm sort of hoping that everybody else does too. Now, obviously, before all this as well, I always do audio checks and things like that. I make sure everything works just before I set this up. I found that this machine, and in fact, the last talk I did also in Europe a few weeks ago, I found the same thing. Come on, you can't not laugh at that. People love that. What I found was that every time I extended the display, so something on my screen that's different to the big screen, the video wouldn't play. And fortunately, it didn't matter too much for the talk I was doing, but I only realized once it got going. So just check all of this stuff. Obviously check sound levels, things like that. So basically, this now takes me through to what will be the start of my talk. And the thing you got to work out is someone going to sort of come and introduce you, you know, because they want to sort of say, hey, it's yada yada from this thing that does this stuff. And for a keynote, often this is what will happen. There'll be someone that wants to say, you know, welcome everybody, it's going to be awesome. So I want to sort of play this other stuff before the guy comes on stage and does that. So I assume Jacob will be introducing everyone, but we'll see when we get the video in the end. And then this sort of screen over here on the left can sit there, and then my talk will start. So what I'm going to do now is just try and run through the whole thing without really looking at my notes, because you can't do that. And we'll see if I can sort of bring it in on the 54 minutes, which is what my total timing says. And when I get to the end of it, I'm going to relay what I think was good, what I think was bad. And yeah, we'll see how it goes. So here we go. Let's kick it off. All right. Thank you very much for having me back in Oslo again. It's really neat coming back here. It's the third time actually that I've been back to NDC, and it's a privilege to do the keynote. I hope everybody liked the intro. Everyone seems kind of excited about that. But it is a long way to come every time I come over here. And the reality of it is that everywhere is a long way away from Australia. And when I go away, I've got two little kids. I've got a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old. And they're always like, Daddy, what do you do? Where do you go? You know, when you go to the other side of the world, what are you doing when you're there? And I have to explain, well, it's a huge amount of work. Last year, I was here in Oslo, and I never got a chance for any fun whatsoever. All I did was work, work, work. I did all these back-to-back talks. I had to do all this preparation. All these people wanted to talk about security things. I never got a chance to have any fun at all in NDC Oslo last year. And, you know, it's a shame that it's just such a serious event and we never get any time out. But be that as it may, I thought I'll come back again this year and, you know, maybe I'll get a chance to have some fun this time. So that's what I tell the kids anyway. Now, the truth is sometimes a little bit different. When I go somewhere, I like to find out a little bit of information I can share with the kids. I can tell them something interesting about the corner of the world that I'm going to. And before I came over to this region, Scandinavia if you like, I went to look for some facts, and I found something really interesting about Donald Duck. And what I actually found was that in Sweden they love Donald Duck so much that they actually had to make it illegal to vote for him. That is how much they love him in Sweden. And I thought that is a really bizarre thing, and I'm explaining this to the kids. And the kids are looking at me and they're going, but Daddy, why would anyone want to vote for a loud, obnoxious, arrogant character called Donald? Who would ever want to vote in a Donald? And they had a good point. Maybe there should be a ban on voting for Donald. Maybe the Swedish people are right, and some areas in the rest of the world could possibly learn some things. But be that as it may, so I'm talking to the children. And as I'm talking to the children, I'm thinking about how different the world is since I was their age. So how different the technology in particular is. And I thought back to, particularly back to the 70s. So I was born in the 70s. I have Very vague recollections. I was young in the 70s, very young. But it was interesting to look at how people got online in the 70s. And one of the first things to remember about getting online is that it was actually an explicit process. So today we're always online. We're always online by virtue of the Wi-Fi network at home. And then we get to work and there's the Wi-Fi network. And in between we're on the 3G or the 4G. We're always connected. But back in the 70s, it was an explicit process. You had to actually think about how you got online. I went and found a little bit of information, and I found a little video about what it was like to get back online back then. And I found a couple here. They're on a British TV show called Database. This is Julian and Pat. And Julian's going to show you how easy it is to get online.
The computer's asking me if I want to log on, and it's now telling me to phone up the main Presscell computer, which I will now do.
It's a very simple connection to make.
Extremely simple. And I can actually leave the modem plugged in once it's done that without affecting the telephone. I'm now waiting for the computer to answer me. It asks with a tone, and then I just flick the switch on the modem and replace the receiver. And
things are starting to happen.
Things are starting to happen. The Presscell computer is now asking me to enter my own personal password, which I've now done.
Now, keeping in mind, this is with the Presscell computer. Presscell computers came out in the late 70s. This particular video was in the early 80s. But there are several things that I think are really insightful about this that many people today may not have thought about. And one of them is using a TV. Now, for many of us that are about my age, so born in the 70s, you may go, yes, well, I remember that. Commodore 64 used to use a TV. If you had an Atari, it would use a TV. Mind you, we have PlayStations and Xboxes today, so maybe that's familiar, but the personal computer back in 70s, 80s used the TV. If you're lucky, it would be colour TV. Wasn't always. A lot of people still on black and white, even into the 80s. So that was one thing. The other thing is, I love the way the reporter says, it's all very easy, isn't it? All you do is pick up the telephone after you've moved the plugs, and then you dial the computer, you wait till the computer talks to you, you hang it up, and now you're online. It was a very explicit process. But thirdly, there was one other thing, and I'm not sure if any of you saw it just towards the end. There were a few people laughing, so I suspect that maybe you did. There was something interesting that Julian did when he logged in. Let's play that back a little bit. We'll zoom in and see if we can figure it out. What do you reckon his password was? Right, 1, 2, 3, 4. We've been doing passwords wrong for like 40 years. We're still doing the same stuff. So even though so much other stuff has actually changed, this is just like it always was. We've still got the same problems with people using passwords of 1, 2, 3, 4, or if there's some minimum length restrictions, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, moving back to the Presscell. So Presscell was a very early version of what later became this premise of getting online. It was a predecessor, if you like, for the modern internet as we know it. And the Presscell could run at up to 1200 baud. Now, many of you probably don't know what a baud is. We'll put it this way. There are 1 million bauds in a megabit. So when the Presscell is running at 1200 baud, we're talking around about 1/1000th of a megabit. And this is interesting because when you think about it, today, if you had a connection that was 1 megabit, you'd go, gee, that's a bit shit, isn't it? You know, you can't do much with the connection that's 1 megabit. And what I find really interesting about this is to look at how much it has actually changed in terms of connectivity. So back then, the Presscell, you get 1200 baud sitting at home in your home office or whatever it may be. Now these days, you can jump on an A380 and fly to the other side of the world and get Wi-Fi in the air. Now recently I went to Europe and I was on the A380 and I connected. And I got to be honest, I wasn't real happy. And later on I thought about this and went, what the hell am I complaining about? I'm at 40,000 feet doing 900 kilometers an hour and I'm still running about 70 times faster than what the Prestel was. And I'm complaining. What an asshole. What is wrong with me? This is amazing. So we've moved the bar that far in terms of what we expect of our connectivity. It's a wonderful time when this is our problem, you know, when we're going, oh gee, this is a bit crap. I'm only getting like thousands and thousands aboard whilst I'm on an international jetliner. But of course, the reason that I can do this in the first place is because mobile. So mobile devices are now becoming obviously ubiquitous. And what we've actually seen is since the early 90s, when we saw the first introduction of mobile phones, we've seen them get smaller. Now I remember when I first saw mobile phones in the 90s, and here's the really weird thing, think about it, we've got adults in here, in this room, writing code professionally, who weren't even born when we started seeing mobile phones. That'll make a bunch of you feel very old. But be that as it may, what happened back then, for those of you who can't recall, is we started with these big phones. Phones that were so big you could not put them in your pocket. And then they shrunk year by year by year by year. And the most you could do with that phone there in the early 2000s, that little one, is that you could possibly play Snake. Yes, you could make phone calls, you could do things like that. But the best you could do in terms of highly interactive graphics and compute power was playing Snake. And now people had things to do on the toilet when they never did before. Well, I mean, they had other things to do, but now they had something to do while they were doing the other things. And then as time went by, we went back up the other way. We started getting bigger. Screens kept growing and growing and growing. And they got smarter and they got more powerful, and we managed to do more and more things with the screens. Many people started to get worried because they said, well, what this means is that we're becoming an antisocial society. It means we sit there looking at our phones, not talking to the people next to us. And this was an entirely new problem. We had never before in history experienced this antisocial behavior. So phones just created entirely new social problems that we'd never seen before, allegedly. But of course, smartphones as we know them today really kicked off with Apple. So really kicked off in 2007 when Jobs came out and said, hey, I got this new thing. Now Jobs always had a way with words, and here's how he'd describe it.
Introducing a truly magical, wonderful, pretty amazing, far better, amazing, great, amazing.
He was never short for words, was he? I mean, they were often the same words, but he was never short for them. But the reality of it is the iPhone was amazing and revolutionary. And we know that now with the benefit of hindsight, because we can look back at it and say, yes, this is the thing that then began this smartphone era, and obviously Android followed and the rest is history. But at the time, not everybody agreed with Jobs. In fact, some people thought it was going to be a flop.
Steve Jobs goes to Macworld and he pulls out this iPhone. What was your first reaction when you saw that?
$500 fully subsidized with a plan? I said, that is the most expensive phone in the world, and it doesn't appeal to business customers because it doesn't have a keyboard, which makes it not a very good email machine.
So Steve Ballmer, he wasn't quite on board with Jobs. You know, he was backing the Windows strategy, and Windows Phone had been very successful, particularly in the early 2000s. And he was pretty convinced that Apple was going down the wrong path and Windows Phone would win. And it's interesting when you look at it now, right? We look at the balance. And out of curiosity, has anyone here got a Windows Phone? You're the guy. I've heard about you. You're here. We should get a photo together later. So I'll send it to Microsoft. They'd love it. Really, it'd be awesome. But that is kind of the reality of where we are now, right? So yeah, Ballmer didn't quite have it right. Now, mind you, Apple has got it wrong in the past as well. So I don't want to beat up too much on Ballmer, because there were other things that he did which were actually quite revolutionary. So, for example, we always think of Jobs as being the showman. So Jobs is the guy who could captivate and excite the audience like no one else could, particularly around that era of the iPhone in 2007. But years before that, Ballmer knew how to excite an audience like no one else.
Ladies and gentlemen, Steve Ballmer!
He was a very enthusiastic guy. Still is a very enthusiastic guy, I believe. This was at Microsoft's 25th anniversary in 2000. He's still going. He's got a lot of energy, Steve, doesn't he? But this was years before Jobs, and Ballmer had this charisma, which was really exciting. This video became known as the monkey dance. Search for the monkey dance, you'll find Ballmer. Steve is no longer with Microsoft. He's doing some other things these days, but it was a seminal moment for Microsoft. Now, the thing with phones is that it is a very competitive market. Everybody wants to have a point of difference. And what we're finding is that that is the truth, not just with phones themselves, but with accessories as well. So we're seeing a lot of innovation in phone accessories. For example, there is the Perphone. So imagine this, you're out and about, you're talking on the phone, but you then realise that you need perfume because you smell bad. I think that's why people use perfume. Wouldn't it be great if you could combine the two together and thus you have the Perphone? Now, if you're a man looking at this and you're thinking, well, I could use this would be good, but clearly it's targeted at women, then don't worry because there's a male version as well. And just in case it's not entirely clear how this may work, Perphone has done a little video. So you're here, you're having your business meeting, you finish, you go, gee, I kind of smell like shit. Maybe I need a bit of perfume. You rotate the dial, you give it a squeeze. Now, after squirting it on your neck, you then smell your wrist. I believe that's how it works, just to make sure it's okay. And that's how it works. It's entirely masculine. Don't dismiss it as being anything else. But that's the Perphone. Now, the thing about phone accessories is that, this is a little bit niche, but the thing that has become very, very popular phone accessories-wise is the selfie stick. You see these selfie sticks everywhere. Someone recently went through and started replacing guns in movies with selfie sticks, which was kind of cool because here Arnie looks a lot less menacing. Over here, John Wayne, it's a bit more chilled out. I believe that is actually a Hello Kitty cover on the phone as well. So that has made him much more approachable. But the thing with selfie sticks is that they're bloody annoying. And they're so annoying that they're now being banned because, quite frankly, we don't like the selfie stick. It's obnoxious using a selfie stick. You're sticking it in people's faces, you're carrying it around like an idiot We don't like the selfie stick. They're getting banned. And they're getting banned in places like amusement parks and zoos. So this one here is in a zoo. There's a little monkey looking at it on the sign. But what I really like about this one is the guy who took the photo has got the selfie stick in front of the sign which says no selfie sticks, but the selfie stick is not even facing at him doing a selfie. It's taking a photo of the monkey and he has another phone taking a photo of his selfie stick next to the no selfie stick sign. It's all very meta, isn't it? So that's selfie sticks. And the thing about selfie sticks is as much as we like to take photos of ourselves with it, sometimes we want to take photos of ourselves with our pets as well. But the pets know they're stupid. So the pets need a way of being convinced to look at the phone, which is why we have the pooch selfie. So this is the evolution of the selfie stick. You stick the pooch selfie on the phone, you put the ball in the phone, and the dog looks at the phone, and now you have a beautiful selfie with man's best friend. Check out the dog too. He's so focused. This thing works. It works beautifully. Dogs and the internet actually have a bit of a history. And if we think back to about 93, we saw this comic. This was a comic in the New Yorker, 1993. The text here says, on the internet, no one knows you're a dog. And this was a really important observation at the time because it recognized that when you go onto the internet, you could be anybody. Your gender didn't matter, your color, your sexuality, if you're Swedish. No one cared about these things. You could be whoever you wanted to be because you're sitting there at the keyboard. This, in many ways, was very empowering. People could suddenly be whoever they wanted to be. And then we ran into a problem about 3 years ago. The NSA, Snowden, came out and said, there's a bit of a problem. we know which of you are dogs. We know which dog food you eat. We also know which other dogs' butts you've been smelling. We know where you take a dump. Not only do we know you're a dog, but we know all of these deeply personal things about you. So before, where we thought we actually had more anonymity than pre-internet, now we realize that we actually had less. Now this was concerning, and people quite rightly got very upset about the impact on their privacy. But it wasn't just the NSA. There's been a lot of other stuff going on that has impacted personal privacy in ways we didn't really expect. For example, Ashley Madison. Ashley Madison got hacked last year, and they had about 30 million accounts exposed. Names, addresses, phone numbers, sexual desires. People literally killed themselves after this happened because it destroyed their lives. So Avid Life Media, the owners of Ashley Madison, needed to come up with a plan. And they came up with this idea to give people back their privacy. And I want to show you how it works. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to jump over into my web browser. And what I'm going to do in my web browser is we're going to head over to ashleymadison.com. Now what we're going to do when we get here is we're going to create an account. Now I should just point something out. My wife is in the audience. Thank you, darling. Nice to have you here. I'm about to create an Ashley Madison account. It is for research purposes, and I've got thousands of witnesses here. So if ever they get breached again and my name comes up, this is why. Be that as it may, let's get into it. Here's what we're going to do. We need to decide who we are and what we would like. And I am an attached male, and I would be seeking a female if I was out there looking to have an affair, which is exactly what Ashley Madison was there to do. What we need to do now is come up with a little bit of information, and I'm just going to zoom through this. I'm going to fat finger this. We can be whatever username we want. Password, I don't think they really care about password strength. We'll be in Australia, we'll be in that postcode. We can put some crap there. We can be from 1982, that's fine. Our limits, something short term, something long term. Cyber affair, I like the sound of that, let's do that. Our height, I'm pretty tall, not that tall, about there. Let me see, weight, I'm going to be about there. Body type, yeah, slim will do. Ethnicity, Caucasian, African, Asian, Hispanic, First Nations, will be other. Let's go a little bit incognito. And then you just put in any crappy old email address like this. And now we're going to go to the next screen. And this is where the magic happens. Because what it's going to want us to do is add a discrete photo. So here's what I want to do. I need a photo. So I'm going to open up this little selfie app here, and we're going to take a picture. Boy, isn't that nice of them? That fails completely. There's still something wrong. Let's close it again, and we'll try it again. and we'll try and take a photo, and it doesn't work, which is okay, because I'm prepared. I have a photo that I created earlier. And if I go into my pictures over here, I have a selfie. There you go, organized. So what's happening now is we're uploading this selfie into Ashley Madison. And after it uploads, what we're going to have to do is work on our privacy, because we don't want anyone else to know who I am. Otherwise, my wife is not going to be real happy. So we'll do that, we'll apply and continue. And this is the magic, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to make me anonymous. Check this out. How's that? Actually, you know what you do? You just click it like that. Click it. And then you've got to get the mask just the right size. In fact, you can see some of the other ladies in the photo just behind this model, where you can see that they also have masks. So basically, I'm now Zorro as far as Ashley Madison is concerned. And some of the ladies over there also look to be Zorettes, female versions of Zorro, as it may be. And we've all got anonymity. Isn't that marvelous? So this is Avid Life Media's solution to how to be anonymous. Amazing stuff, isn't it? Privacy is a really important topic. And one of the things we're finding is that in some ways our privacy is being eroded by the likes of what we just saw. But in other ways, things are moving in the right direction. So for example, anyone know what all of these things have in common? Right, encryption. Everything is encrypted. So for example, the iPhone and newer Android devices on hardware that can support it are encrypted. Everything is encrypted in storage. We just saw how much the FBI struggled to read data out of the iPhone of the San Bernardino shooter. They had to pay $1.5 million to a security firm who could eventually crack it. I'm okay with that. If the barrier to entry for access to a phone is the FBI needs to spend $1.5 million, that's pretty bloody good encryption. I'm happy with that. WhatsApp and iMessage are end-to-end encrypted. So if you and I have a chat over WhatsApp, it encrypts on my device, it decrypts on your device. It doesn't sit anywhere in the middle, decrypted. It's not like SMS or anything like that. So these are encrypted end-to-end. And the great news is, with all of these devices, that everybody gets encryption. It doesn't matter who you are. If you have one of these devices, you get it. She's huge up there, isn't she? Kind of scary, zombie-like. Everybody gets encryption. Now, that's the good bit, right? The first part of the good bit. The second part of the good bit is that you don't even notice you've got it. It just feels like you're wearing nothing at all. And what I mean by that is that you don't see any slowdown. So it's not like, gee, the encryption's making everything run a bit slow. You don't have to enable it. It's not like I need to now share keys and manage things that are beyond my comprehension. This is why PGP sucks so much for everyday people. This just works magically. Not only does it work magically, but it means that there are some really interesting observations around how it changes our communications. So for example, if I was having a chat with Ted and we were using FaceTime, we would be end-to-end encrypted. I keep calling the kids while I'm over here, a FaceTime with the kids back in Australia. Encrypted on my device all the way through to Australia, where it's decrypted on my parents' device who are looking after the kids. Awesome. However, if you're Gordon Gekko in Wall Street in the 1980s and you're wheeling and dealing, making share trades, talking over the normal telephone line, no encryption. And it doesn't matter that that was the 1980s because it's the same now. No encryption on landlines, no encryption on mobile lines. Grandma talking to the kids on FaceTime, encryption. Stockbroker doing multi-billion-dollar trades, no encryption. It's an interesting observation. Now, another interesting observation is how things that we are very familiar with are changing fundamentally. So telephones, and here's where we're seeing this sort of dichotomy. Great encryption on the one hand, nothing on the other. Another thing is TVs. So think about the way TVs are changing. And the thing that I find particularly interesting is the way our expectation of TV is changing. So if you have kids, young kids, your TV probably looks like this. I know mine does. I went and checked it when I was doing this talk. And it looks like that because the kids are trying to pinch and zoom on the TV. And they can't. And they're confused because they say, but I was just on the iPad and it worked perfectly. What is wrong with the TV? So they are actually growing up in an era of this touch enablement, this sort of fully interactive kind of environment. So I think about my son, he's 6 years old. He has never known a time without an iPad, let alone an iPhone. So he is very used to this sort of interaction. And he thinks the TV, he's actually getting the hang of it. He's 6, he's a bit smarter. My 3-year-old daughter, she's still trying to touch things on the TV. And when I saw this, I thought, wow, how different is this to when I was a kid? Because when I was a kid, the big thing that I knew about TV was I wasn't allowed to sit too close to it. You ever get this? Like you're getting right up there looking at the cartoons Saturday morning, and your mum's like, don't sit too close to the TV, you'll get square eyes, got to move back. And now we're strapping the things to our face as close as we can possibly get to be totally immersed in these crazy virtual reality worlds right here in front of your eyes. So it's amazing how much these things are changing. And what I'm actually finding now is that, frankly, a lot of the time I don't know how devices are meant to behave. I pick something up and go, yeah, I think that this is a tablet. And then it's like, oh shit. Literally just the other day, I saw someone with a new machine and I picked it up and I very, very carefully started folding the lid back because I didn't know if it was meant to go all the way back or not. And then there's all the time someone looks at my laptop, my nice machine here, my powerhouse, which is just meant for performance, and people are swiping the screen. Get your fingers off the screen. It doesn't do that. But that's what they do. Technology, in many ways, is becoming unrecognizable. Very recent technology is becoming very unrecognizable. And having kids makes this particularly apparent. So I thought I'd do a little test. I grabbed my 6-year-old and I gave him a piece of very ubiquitous technology that all of you would have used extensively. And I wanted to see his reaction. Here's what he said.
All right, how old are you now, Ari? 6. So have you ever seen one of those?
Nope.
You don't know what it is? It's a floppy disk.
Oh, it's not even floppy.
No, it's not. What about this? What do you reckon that is?
A USB.
And what do you do with the USB?
You plug it into the computer.
Ah, you put files on it, right?
Yeah.
And did you know we used to use floppy disks before we had USBs? But these USB sticks can now hold up to 700,000 times more than a floppy disk. Isn't that amazing?
And it is amazing because he had, in all honesty, he had never seen the floppy disk before. But the other thing that was amazing is I actually had trouble finding one. I'm going through my cupboards, tearing stuff out. I couldn't find a floppy disk anywhere. I had to go to my wife. She had one that literally had an old university assignment on it from quite a long time ago. Had one laying around. Now I mentioned that you could store up to 700,000 times more on a thumb drive than one of those 3.5-inch floppies that used to hold 1.44 megabytes. And it's true, you can get a Kingston HyperX Predator. How good is that of a name for a USB stick? Predator. And it can hold a terabyte on a thumb drive. But as awesome as that is, and it is awesome, I'm almost more impressed by the fact that you can fit 1/4 terabyte on a micro SD card. So something the size of your thumbnail, 1/4 terabyte. You could swallow one of those and barely even notice it. You could probably swallow 4 of those and have as much as the Predator, which I don't suggest swallowing because I think you'd choke on that. It is a big USB stick. That's amazing stuff. But the other amazing thing about this is that although Ari had never seen a floppy disk before, or never held a floppy disk, he did actually know what it was in terms of what it stood for. And here's why. Every single time he saves a file, he clicks on a floppy disk. But he had never thought that this actually was what he was clicking on. I guess maybe he thought it was no more a funnel than, you go into Excel and filter. It's a funnel, right? Funnel filters. But he did not get the iconography of this. So he didn't understand that a floppy disk is actually a thing. And we had to play with it, and we looked at how the slide moved across and how the thing span, and we talked about the magnets on the disk, which is all kind of cool. And he didn't care too much about it because it only holds 1.44 megabytes. But the observation of something being so ubiquitous and now not being understood, yet still living on via icons like this, I thought was quite interesting. Now think back as well to what we used to do with our floppy disks. Well, one of the things we used to do is put games on them. Doom, massively popular. Doom launched in 1993 and it came on 2 floppy disks. So it was less than 3 megabytes in size. A lot of web pages aren't less than 3 megabytes in size. And this was an entire first-person shoot 'em up. Doom was made by John McCormick, who's now actually the CTO of Oculus, which we just saw strapped to your face. Now, Doom was enormously cool in the early 90s. It was sort of the first kind of canonical first-person shoot 'em up that really, really got traction. And Doom actually remains popular even today. And what you see is people hacking devices to run Doom. So for example, this is Doom running on a Canon PixMark printer. It's not great, graphics-wise, granted, but it's frickin' Doom running on a printer. That is actually kind of amazing that you can get a printer to do that. Makes you think though, if you can update the firmware on a printer to add your own arbitrary firmware onto a device which you're sending important documents to, scanning important documents to, has internet connectivity, what might you be able to do with it? Bad things. There's a simple answer. Many bad things. It's not just printers. You can actually run Doom on an ATM. There's a couple of Aussie blokes who a couple of years ago said, hey, this would be a good idea. Let's see if we can do this. I love this idea. I would love to see an ATM running Doom, not just in a workshop like this, but when I go to get out money. You can get your money if you can chop down a monster with the chainsaw, the shotgun, and the BFG. Love the BFG. You've got to nail them with these weapons and then you get your cash out. So that's Doom on an ATM. But we didn't just have Doom. The other big game of the 90s was Quake. And you can run Quake on an oscilloscope. Now, I had no idea that an oscilloscope had the fidelity to do this. And granted, they're not great graphics, but it's amazing. It is an oscilloscope running Quake. Look at that. We have had this fascination with hacking devices to do things that they're not meant to do, because there's something kind of cool about it. And people will find all sorts of different devices that you can do that with. Coffee machine. Coffee machines have displays. You know what you can do with a coffee machine? Check this out. All right, I shall save you from the rest of the chorus line there. And look, I could not do a talk about technology history and not have some sort of rickrolling going on. I actually think a rickroll is a really good solution for a coffee machine, because think about it. Think about how you feel about coffee. Never going to give you up. Never going to let you go. Never going to turn around and desert you. It's pretty much how I feel about my coffee. So the thing is, and the reason that this is even possible in the first place, is that we are making devices smarter and smarter. We're trying to build more intelligence into our devices. And one of the early examples of building intelligence into a device, or building any sort of intelligence into a system, was this guy, Clippy. We loved Clippy. for a very brief period. Clippy was there in Microsoft Office from 97 through to 2003, through to Office 2003. So he kind of lived on for a while until he gradually disappeared as people upgraded. But he remains a crowd favourite. Now, Clippy was actually an early pioneer in terms of this, not really artificial intelligence, but it was sort of like a helper. It was a contextually aware helper. It could see you were doing something and it could offer some support. So, for example, you might be John McAfee. John McAfee's making a bit of a comeback. A little bit of helpful advice there. I used to do a lot of work with SharePoint. Clippy could have been very useful with me there, doing my SharePoint work. Now, Clippy was one thing, and Clippy was obviously Microsoft's incarnation of a contextually aware helper. Another one that many of you are probably very familiar with still today is Google. So you go to do a Google search, and it will give you some hints as to what you might be looking for. Now, and by the way, many of these are true as well. Sweden is a very strange place. I mean, I don't know if it's quite as strange as New Zealand, but it is a strange place. So, for an interesting experiment, try taking Google. You try searching for something. And then what you do is you get an incognito version of your Google, and then you route through a VPN in a different country. See how different the results are. Because it's going to target it to you, who it knows you are and where it thinks you are, and it's going to do all these freaky kind of things. So Google's one. More recently, we've had Siri. And the idea of Siri is that you can now talk to your phone. Now, this actually makes a lot of sense because we all know the iPhone's a bit shit because it doesn't have a proper keyboard. But Bourne was actually right about that. It's not a pleasant thing to type on, at least not compared to just pushing the home button and going, hey, tell me about something, such as Australian wildlife. It's very useful for that. We'd love to have you guys down here. Just look up, stay alive, drop bear aware. So there's that. But one of the problems that we have found, we being Australians, one of the problems we've found with Siri is that apparently it doesn't understand us very well. Apparently, we speak awfully. And Siri has been struggling to understand what Australians are trying to say, which I actually found kind of interesting. I don't know, am I that hard? But all of these things really haven't been artificial intelligence in any sort of I might pass the Turing test kind of way. I mean, these are helpers. You ask a question, it gives you an answer, it's sort of contextually aware. And then recently Microsoft said, no, we're going to do better. We're going to come out with Tay. Anyone see Tay? So Microsoft had this idea. They said, what we're going to do is we are going to create a Twitter chatbot called Tay. And we are going to make it learn from other people. And then when it learns from other people, it's going to be able to interact with them and they won't know that it's actually a chatbot because it will be so good at pretending to be human. And Microsoft was enormously excited about this. They said, yes, this is going to be the thing. So they rolled it out. It was only a few months ago, it was in March. And Tay started tweeting. And it turned out Tay was an arsehole. Seriously, she was terrible. But she wasn't terrible due to any design fault on behalf of the engineers at Microsoft. She was terrible because they did too good a job. They made her so adept at observing people around her and behaving like them. She was saying stuff like this. She turned out to be enormously sexist, which unfortunately is very often the way on the internet. But she observed that and she replicated the behavior. She got worse. She learned to swear as well. Tay was terrible. So Microsoft had to pull the pin because she was terrible, because she was so good. And it's it's on the one, it's just this dichotomy, right? On the one hand, it's so unfortunate that it had all this terrible racist, feminist, or sexist, abusive behavior. And then on the other hand, that it was actually so good at observing what was around us, but it is we that are terrible. So we'll see. Hopefully they can program into Tay not just observing people around you, but actually having a sense of right and wrong, and maybe building in a little bit of a moral compass. So there's that. Now, the idea of having artificial intelligence, or any sort of intelligence, is that you can put it into things that make them do things that they couldn't do before. Internet of things. This brings us to IoT. IoT is really big business, and it's really big business because we want to put computers in everything. At least this is what we're told. The marketing people tell us, you need a computer in your thing. It needs to be able to talk over the internet. So I thought what would be interesting is I would go and find some IoT things and share them here. Here's what I found. There is no more appropriate music for a collage of IoT things than Benny Hill in 8-bit. Let's face it. The thing with all these IoT devices is that it is actually getting hard to tell what is serious and what is not. And I look at something like the umbrella and I say, why? Why do you want to internet connect your umbrella? What will you do by being able to communicate with the umbrella via your smartphone? Is it going to tell you if it's raining? Well, you could walk out and see if you get wet. You know, like that works quite well. It's worked that way for quite some time. I don't know anymore when an IoT device is serious or not. And sometimes I come across one and I pause and I wonder, is this legitimate or not? Because I know that I have seen IoT things that I thought would never actually be possible, never be real, that were real things. But on ones like this next one, I'm just not too sure, because we're now at this point of getting absolutely, totally crazy. Have a look.
The Wank Band. The first gadget for the wearable tech era that allows men to love the planet by loving themselves.
Now, I'm not sure if in Norwegian, wank is a word which is popular, which is known. And just in case the context of what this IoT device actually does is not clear, I'll show you just a little bit more video.
The band contains a valve with a small weight inside that generates and stores energy when moved in an up and down motion. And we all know what exercise does that move, right? Now just plug any device you need to charge into the USB port on the band. Smartphone, laptop, camera, tablet, and voila! You are creating dirty energy.
Oh, jeez. Oh, complete with bad jokes as well. Who knows? Honestly, in this modern day of IoT things, could be legit, may not be. It's very, very hard to tell. But when we think about IoT devices and how intimate they're becoming, there's a new class of device that's taking things one step further. And it's the devices which are very, very personal. Now, let me give you a scenario. There is a theory that when you are pregnant, ladies, gentlemen may also be familiar with this theory. The theory is that when you're pregnant, you may play music to the baby, and the baby hears the music, and then when it's born, it comes out smarter than if it hadn't heard the music. I mean, inevitably you play Beethoven or something like that. I don't think you play the Spice Girls. It might come out dumber. So you play good music. And any reasonable person may say, okay, well, maybe that means I sit down somewhere comfortably in a chair, put my feet up, and crank the stereo. Sounds fair. Other people may say, well, look, what we might do is we'll get some headphones and we'll put them over the pregnant belly so we get a little bit more direct. Maybe the sound waves will go into the belly and the baby will hear it. But there's another approach. There's another much more direct approach available from this new emerging subclass of IoT device called the insertable. Now, in case the purpose of this particular insertable is not clear, in case you're not sure of the mechanics of how this would work to play music to the baby, they do have a very helpful infographic that leaves absolutely no doubt whatsoever about how this device may work. And this is a real thing. I do not make this up. You can go and search for baby pod. This is the way the baby pod works. It's not the only IoT insertable out there though. And I noticed that a few of the guys here are just looking at it with a really uncomfortable look. And I suspect what you're thinking is, oh, well, it's weird, but at least I never need to use it. But don't worry, because there's a class of IoT insertable that'll work for you as well. It's this one. Now, to be clear, this is not a thermometer that you put in your mouth. It's not that. The thing that has me particularly confused about this particular thermometer, though, is the gymnastics of how it would actually work, because the thing is sticking out of the bottom of the iPhone. And I'm not sure, first of all, how you would actually perform the required activity for measuring the temperature. And second of all, how you'd even read it whilst you're doing that. I don't know that I'll really want to put my expensive iPhone in that region either, if I'm quite honest. But this is the crazy thing about where IoT and technology is going. And it makes me think back to where we started with Julian and Pat. So back there, think about it, back in the late 70s, early 80s, would they ever have thought that this may be where this new internet thing is eventually taking us? And when we look at the predictions that were made for the internet back in the 70s, even earlier, there were some really insightful things that turned out to be true. Arthur C. Clarke was very good at this. He said we're going to have computers in every home. There'll be smaller computers and there'll be bigger computers that are remote. We're going to be able to work from home instead of going into an office. It's very insightful. We're going to form social networks over the internet. Also true. All of these things came true. But all of these things are very broad-reaching, very long-term sort of views. Yeah, we'll be remote and we'll have computers at home and we'll have social networks. And no one could have seen the fact that you would have a thermometer quite like that which you could stick up your ass connected to the internet. And this is what I find fascinating. We know these big general trends, but we often don't see the details of what we're going to actually create. Now, I'm very excited about this, and I'm very excited for my kids. It's my 3-year-old daughter. I'm really excited about the things that she will have in the future that we've never thought about, the things that you guys will create. And you have a better ability than ever before to create awesome things that we have never thought about that are going to make her life and everybody else's life totally awesome. Thank you very much, everyone. Okay. So I estimated on my timing sheet I needed about 54 minutes down there, and that takes me through to 52.5 minutes, which is really good. And there was one area which I think was on the devices where I actually allowed more time than what I needed, which is cool because I have an hour, which means they can start late, something can go wrong, I can go off on a tangent somewhere, and I have time up my sleeves because you never want to run it quite up to the wire. In there as well, as I was getting to the clippy section, my wife walked in to the room and I had to stop, and it totally sort of blew my concentration, and I had to sort of sit down for 5 minutes and chill before I started again. I should have been clearer and let her know that I was recording and rehearsing. And I suggest you do this, make it really, really clear you don't have any interruptions, because you get on a flow, right? And of course, when you're there on the stage, you'll normally just flow all the way through, but then on the other hand, you may also have things go wrong that interrupt your flow. So, you know, in a way, I guess it's not too bad to have a bit of an interruption and have to recover. I'm really happy with that talk. There's a couple of things that I want to change. I'm not really happy with the clippy bits. I think that they're too kind of abstract. I think there could be something that's a lot more direct about here is Clippy making an observation on something that is technology related. I think maybe the John McAfee thing won't go down with everyone, and the Indiana Jones dude with his face melting off is, yeah, okay. It's not bad, but it's not good. So there was that. So I've got a couple little things to refine, and I will do this talk again at least once more before the actual show. And after recording this, I will probably replay this and just sit there and watch it and see how I thought about it as well. So look, I mean, often people are sort of saying, okay, well, how do you not get nervous when you go and do this? And the way I know I don't get nervous, and I generally don't feel nervous when I do this, is I just keep rehearsing it. And I rehearse it to the point where I'm so comfortable with it and I know it so well that it doesn't matter whether it's 3 people or 3,000 people or whatever it is, you just get up there and do it. So I hope that has been useful. We'll see how the actual talk goes, and I'll probably plug this out with that talk, and then you can kind of see the before and after of what goes into making a keynote.